A person is the sum of their accomplishments. But if we had another go round, will we do things differently? And will we even have a choice in the matter? A Time to Live by Joe Haldeman. Read by Karl. The man who owns the moon, they called him when he was alive, and the man who owned the moon for some time thereafter. D. Thorne Harrison. Born in 1990 in a mean little Arkansas strip mining town, formal education terminated in 2005 with his escape from a state reformatory. 10 years of odd jobs on one side, the law on the other. Escalating ambition and power, by the age of 35, being our chairman of a diversified, mostly legitimate corporation. Luck, he called it. One planet was not enough. But a week before his 40th birthday, Harrison fired his board of directors and liquidated an awesome fortune. He sank every penny of it into the development and exploitation of the Adams-Beeson drive, brought space travel to anyone who could afford it, bought a chunk of the moon to give them some place to go, pleasure domes, retirement cities, safaris for the jaded rich, made enough to buy the votes to initiate the terraforming of Mars. As the first trickle of water crawled down the Great Rift Valley, Harrison lay in his own geriatrics hospital in Copernicus City in his 120th year. The excitement may have hastened his passing. Move it, move it, move it! Down the long white corridor, two orderlies pushed the massive cart, drifting in long skips on the lunar gravity, the cart heavy with machines surrounding a frail wisp of a human body. Dead corpse of D. Thorne Harrison. Oxygenated fluorocarbon coursing through slack veins, making the brain think it still lived. Through the bay doors of the cryonics facility, cart braked to a bumpy stop by the cold chamber. Tubes and wires unhooked, and corpse slid without ceremony inside. Chambers locked, pumped, activated, body turned to cold quartz. Good job. Not on the futile hope of future revival. The Nuts had a field day. Harrison had sealed his frozen body in a time-space capsule, subsequently launched towards the center of the galaxy. Also in the capsule were stacks of ultrafiche crystals, along with a viewer, that described humankind's nature and achievement in exhaustive detail, and various small objects of art. One custom crackpot felt that Harrison had betrayed humanity, giving conquering hordes of aliens a roadmap back to Earth. The details of what they could do to us, and why, provided an interesting refraction of the individual's crackpot's problems. The general sort assumed that a race of aliens able to decipher the messages and come visit us must essentially have evolved away from aggression and their base passions. They would observe, perhaps help. Both these groups provided fuel for solemn essays, easy master's theses, and evanescent religions. Other opinions? Glad the old geezer got to spend his money the way he wanted to. Inexcusable waster of irreplaceable artistic resources. Could use the money to feed people. Quixotic gesture, the town scale's too vast. We'll be dead and gone long before anybody reads the damn thing. I've got more important things to worry about. None of the above is true. Supposedly, the miniature Adams-Beeson converter would accelerate the capsule very slowly for about a century, running on a fuel when the craft had achieved a small fraction of the speed of light. It would pass the vicinity of Antares in about 5,000 years. The capsule had a pre-programmed signal generator powered by starlight. It would accumulate power for 10 years at a time, then bring on the message at the 21 centimeter wavelength. The message lasted 90 minutes and would repeat it 3 times. Any idiot with a huge radio telescope and a proper ontological prejudices could decode it. I am an artifact of an intelligent race. My course is thus and so. Catch me if you can. Unfortunately, the craft carried a pretty hefty magnetic field and ran smack dab into Maxwell's equations. Its course carried it through a tenuous but very extensive cloud of plasma, and through the years it kept turning slowly to the right, decelerating. When it came with the cloud, it was pointed back towards the Earth, moving at a very modest pace. In 20,000 years it passed the place where Earth had been, the sun having wandered off in the natural course of things, and continued to crawl out towards the cold oblivion between the galaxies. It still beeped out its code every decade, but it was a long time before anybody paid any attention. I woke up in great pain. That didn't last. How do you feel? Asked a pretty young nurse in a starch green uniform. Didn't answer immediately. There was something wrong. With her, with the hospital room, the bed. The edges were wrong. Too sharp, like a bad mat shot at the cubies. How do you feel? Asked the plain, middle-aged nurse in a starched green uniform. Hadn't seen a change. Is this better? I said it didn't make much difference. My body? My body was 100 years younger. Mind clear, limbs filled with springy muscle, no consciousness of failing organs. I am dead, I asked her, told her. Not really, she said, and I caught her changing. Suddenly, click. Now a white-haired, Charlie-looking doctor, male. Not anymore. You were dead a long time. We rebuilt you. I asked if she would settle on one shape and keep it. They put you out of a capsule, frozen solid? Yes, things went more or less as you planned them. I asked him what he meant by more or less. You got turned around and slowed. It was a long time before we noticed you. I sat up on the bed and stared at him. If he didn't blink, he might change. I asked him how long a time. Nearly 1,000,000 years. 874,896 from the time of launch. I swung to the floor and my feet touched hot sand. Sorry, cold tile. I asked him why he didn't show me his true form. I'm too old to be afraid of boogeymen. He did change his true form. I asked that he change back into one of the others. I had to know which end to talk to. As he became the doctor again, the room dissolved and we're standing on a vast plain of dark brown sand in orderly dunes. The vague shadow in front of me lengthened as I watched. Turned around to see the Milky Way, rather bright, strides at the horizon. There were no stars. Yes, the doctor said. We're on the edge of your galaxy. A sort of sun rose on the opposite horizon, dim, red, and huge, nebulous at its boundaries. An infrared giant, my memory told me. I told him I appreciated being rebuilt, and asked whether I could be of service. Tell you of the ancient past? No, we learned all we could from you when you were putting it back together. He smiled. On the contrary, it's we owe you. Can we take you back to Earth? This planet is just right for us, but I think you'll find it dull. I told him I would like very much to go back to Earth, but I'd like to see some of his world first. Oh, my world is just like this, he said. Live here for lack of variety. Others of my kind live in similar places. Asked if I could meet some of the others. Afraid that would be impossible. They refused to see you, even if I were willing to take you to him. After a pause, he added, It's something like politics. Here. Took my hand on my rose, stars shrinking to a dim spark, disappearing. The galaxy grew larger, we were suddenly inside it, stars streaming by. I asked if this were teleportation. No, it's just a machine. Like a spaceship, but faster, more efficient. Less efficient in one way. I started to ask him how he could breathe and talk, but his weird look cut me off. He seemed to be flickering as if he was going to change shape again. But he didn't. This should be interesting, he said, as the yellow star grew brighter, then swelled to become the familiar sun. I haven't been here myself in 12,000 years. The blue-green ball of Earth was suddenly beneath us. We paused for a moment. It's a short trip, but I don't get out often, he said, apologetically. As we drifted to the surface, it was sunset over Africa. The shape of the western coast seemed not to have changed much. The Atlantic passed beneath us in the border, and we came to ground somewhere in the northeastern United States. We landed on a cow pasture. Its wire fence, improbably, seemed to be made of this same shiny durametal I remembered from my childhood. Where are we? I asked. See, we were just north of Canaan, New York. There was a glideway a few kilometers to the west. I could find a truck stop and catch a ride. He was flickering very fast now, and even when we were invisible, I could see the pasture through him. What are you talking about? I said. It don't have truck stops and glideways 1,000,000 years in the future. He regarded me with fading scorn, so we're only 5 or 10 years in my future. After the year of my birth, that is. 20 at the outside. Didn't have the slightest thing about relativity, and he was gone. A farmer was walking toward me, carrying a wicked-looking scythe. This thing in the pasture used none but me. Good morning, I said to him. I saw it was afternoon. He walked to within striking distance of me and stopped, wearing a grim scowl. He leaned sideways to look behind me. Where's the other feller? Who? I almost said, and wondered when I stopped myself. What other fella? Looked back over my shoulder. He rubbed his eyes. Damn contacts. What are you doing on my property anyway? I got lost. Don't you know where the fence is? Yes, sir, I'm sorry. Was coming to the house to ask the directions to Canaan. Why are you walking with such a funny costume on? Wearing a duplicate of the conservative business suit Harrison was buried in. It's the South, sir. In the city. Shook his head. Kids. Just go over that fence yonder, he pointed. Head straight till you get to the road. Mind you don't touch the fence, so watch out for my goddamn beans. Gets to the road and canes to the left. Thank you, sir. He had turned and was stumping back to the farmhouse. In the truck stop, the calendar read 1995. It's not easy to stay penniless in New York City. Not if you have a 20-year-old body and over a century's worth of experience in separating people from their money. Within a week, the man who had been Harrison was living in a high-class flat behind the protection of the East Village wall, with enough money stacked away to buy him time to think. He didn't want to be Harrison again, that was for sure. Besides the boredom of living the same life over he had known, as Harrison, by the time he was 50, this existence was not a particularly happy one. Physically adjusted to the accumulation of wealth and power, incapable of trusting or being trusted. Besides, Harrison was a 5-year-old in Arkansas, just beginning 2 decades of bad luck that preceded a century of nothing going wrong. Had this sudden cold feeling. I went to the library and looked at microfiches of the last few years, Forbes and Bizweek, and found out who he was, by omission. For less than $1,000, he gave himself a past. A few documents to match counterfeit inserts in government databanks, then a few seemingly illogical investments in commodities that made him a millionaire in less than a year. Then he bought a failing electronics firm and renamed after himself, Lassiter Electronics. He grew a beard he knew would be prematurely white. The firm prospered. He bought a plastics plant and renamed it Lassiter Industries, then the largest printing outfit in Pennsylvania. Officially after that. In 2010, he contrived to be in a waterfront crap game in Galveston, where he lost a large sum to a hard-eyed boy who was very good at cold rolling dice. Lassiter was better, but he himself rolled crapouts. It was 2 days after Harrison's 20th birthday and his first big break. Small bank, then a large one. An aerospace firm, textiles. Piece of an orbital factory, microbearings and data crystals, now named Lassiter Limited. In 2018, still patiently manufacturing predestination, he hired young D. Thorne Harrison as time and motion analyst, knowing all of his credentials were false. Would give Harrison access to sensitive information. By 2021, he was junior vice president in charge of production. By 2022, vice president. Youngest member of the board, he knew interesting things about the other board members. In 2024, Harrison brought to Lassiter's office documents proving he had voting control of 54% of Lassiter Limited. He expected a fight. Instead, Lassiter made a cash settlement, perplexingly small, and dropped out of sight. With half his life left to live, and money enough for much longer, Lassiter bought comfortable places in Paris, Key West, and Colorado, and commuted according to the weather and season. Took a few years for a literary trip around the world. His considerable mental energies he channeled into the world of art rather than finance. He became an accomplished harpsichordist, was well known among the avant-garde for his neo-pointillist constructions. Sculptures of frozen light, careful laser bursts caught in a cube of photosensitive gel. Beautiful women were fascinated by this man who had done so well in 2 seemingly antagonistic fields. He followed Harrison's fortunes closely. The Salad in 2030, buying out the Adams Beeson Drive, which seems like a reckless long shot to most observers, striking a fortune on the moon and getting it back 100-fold. And as the ecologic catalyzers were being seeded on Mars, Harrison, an old man running out of years to buy, Lassiter lay dying in Key West. In the salt breeze on an open veranda, not wanting to clutter up his end with IV tubes and rushing attendants and sterile frigid air, he sent his lone nurse away on an errand that would take too long. His last spoken words calm and reassuring, belying the spike of pain on his chest. The house downstairs was filled with weeping admirers, friends he had not bought, and as the pale blue sky went dark red, he reckoned himself a happy man. Wondered how he'd do it next time, thinking he was the puppeteer, even as the last string was pulled. The end.